Think of your earliest memory. Not a photograph you have seen. The oldest thing you can actually see from the inside. Most people can find one. A room, a staircase, someone's hand, a birthday with the light coming in from the wrong side. Now, the uncomfortable part. Researchers once surveyed more than 6,000 people about their first memory. Close to 4 in 10 describe something from the age of 2 or younger. At that age, that kind of detailed memory is almost certainly not possible. Those memories were not lies. The people telling them had no idea. They had been assembled quietly over years out of photographs, family stories, and a general sense of what childhood looks like, which leaves a strange gap at the beginning of all of us. You were there for years. You have almost nothing. There is a name for this: infantile amnesia. Sigmund Freud gave it that name more than a century ago and explained it as repression. The name survived. The explanation did not. What survived is the pattern, and the pattern is remarkably consistent. Most people's earliest genuine memory sits somewhere around the age of 3 or 4. Before that, the record thins out fast, and then it stops. And it is not a vague, faded kind of missing. It is absent. You learned to walk. You learned a language from nothing, which is the hardest thing you will ever do. You had a first best friend, a favorite object, days that felt enormous. None of it is available to you. Here is the precise question underneath all of this. There are only 2 ways to lose something. Either it was never written down, or it was written down and you can no longer find it. For most of the last century, science assumed the first answer. The infant brain, and the hippocampus in particular, the structure that binds an experience into a memory, was thought to be too immature to record episodes at all. Nothing was lost because nothing was ever really saved. It is a tidy explanation. It also turned out to be very hard to test, because the people you would need to ask cannot yet talk. So researchers started at the other end. Instead of asking adults to look back, one study followed children forward. Children who were 6, 7 years old could still describe events from when they were 3. The same children, a few years later, had lost most of them. The forgetting was not something that had happened long ago in the dark. It could be watched, happening on a schedule. Something else showed up in that work. The boundary is not a single date. It depends on what happened. The birth of a younger sibling can be remembered from around the age of 2. A house move or a death in the family tends to reach back only to about 3. Whatever is doing this, it is not a clean line drawn across a life. It is more like a threshold that some experiences cross and others do not. Then, in 2025, a team of researchers did something that had been considered close to impossible. They put awake infants into an MRI scanner. Almost all previous infant brain imaging had been done while the babies were asleep, for the obvious reason. This team, working with 26 infants between 4 months and 2 years old, kept them awake and gave them something to do. The infants were shown photographs. Later, they were shown those photographs again next to new ones. Babies cannot tell you what they remember, but they show you by looking longer at what is familiar. And the scanner caught the moment in between. When an infant's hippocampus was more active as a picture first appeared, that infant was more likely, later, to look longer at that same picture. That is the signature of a memory being formed. It was found in brains that were supposed to be incapable of forming one. It appears from around the age of 1. The researchers were careful about what this means, and it is worth being equally careful. They did not find your lost memories. What they argue is that the old explanation has the problem in the wrong place. If the encoding works, then infantile amnesia is more likely a failure to retrieve than a failure to store, which raises an obvious and slightly unsettling thought. If it was written down, where did it go?
For that question, the clearest evidence comes not from people, but from mice. In one set of experiments, researchers tagged the specific neurons that were active while an infant mouse learned something, in a way that left those cells permanently marked. Months later, the mice behaved exactly as you would expect. They showed no sign of remembering. Then the researchers switched those tagged cells back on directly. The behavior came back. A memory the animal had by every measure lost was still physically there up to 3 months later. What was missing was not the trace, it was the way in. But the honest version of that result is less cinematic than it sounds. What comes back is measurably poorer than a memory formed in adulthood. Something persists. It is not the room, the light, and the hand. There is also a plausible physical culprit. The infant hippocampus is building itself at an extraordinary rate, adding new neurons faster than it ever will again. In rodents, that turns out to matter. Push the rate of new neurons up, and recently formed memories are forgotten. Suppress it in infancy, and the animals hold on to more. One way to picture it, the memory is still in the building, but the corridors are being rebuilt around it, and the door it used to open onto is now a wall. That is the leading account, and it is worth saying clearly that it is an account, not a verdict. It is also not the only one. A second explanation has been developing in parallel, and it barely mentions neurons. Autobiographical memory, the kind you can narrate, may need scaffolding that a very young child does not have yet. Language, a sense of time, a stable sense of yourself as someone things happen to. On that view, early experience is not so much locked away as stored in a format that the adult mind cannot read. There is real evidence behind it. Children whose families talk about the past in a rich, story-like way tend to end up with earlier first memories than children whose families do not. Something about turning an experience into a told story keeps a handle on it. And a third idea suggests the question itself is slightly wrong. Infancy may be the period in which the brain is learning how to remember at all. On that reading, those years are not a gap in the record. They are the thing that built the recorder. These are not 3 rivals waiting for one to win. They may simply be 3 descriptions of the same process at different scales. So here is the solid ground. Childhood amnesia is real, it is universal, and it is not a trick of adult recollection. It can be observed in children as it happens. Most first memories land around age 3 or 4, and a large share of the ones that claim to be earlier are reconstructions. The infant brain can encode episodic memories from around the age of 1. The hippocampus keeps developing well into the preschool years, which is roughly when the fog lifts. And in animals, early memories that look permanently gone can still be physically present. That is a great deal more than science could say 10 years ago. Here is what nobody can say: whether the same thing is true in you. The experiment that would settle it, reaching into a human brain and switching a specific memory back on, cannot be done, and should not be. So the direct evidence stops at the species line. And there is a harder question underneath it. How much of what persists is still a memory at all? A trace can survive as something much thinner than an episode. A preference, a wariness, a sense that a certain kind of room is safe. That may be exactly what your first years left you. Not scenes, dispositions. Which is a strange kind of answer, but it is an answer. You did not lose those years. You are what they built. The face you trust on sight. The food you find comforting. The particular sound that makes you feel everything is fine. A good deal of that was decided in a period you will never be able to visit. The record is not blank. It was simply never written for you to read.